Welcome to Merrily End. My name's Mark Machado. I'm joined by Nick Brookes in London and my cousin Dominic Machado, who's across the pond in the USA. We've got lots to talk about. The men won the Test series against Bangladesh, but I think we'll start off at the women because we're recording this hours after a historic T20 series win against South Africa in South Africa. Um, they won that third match, and the girls were just absolutely magnificent, weren't they, Dom?
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Last time, they got a win with Cap sitting out. This time, Cap comes back and they still get a win. I think one thing we should shout out is how complimentary that bowling effort was. There were lots of times where it looked like the game was going to get away from them, but they were able to rein it back in. Four different people took wickets. Sugandika came in for Inoka, who had been kind of ineffective. So it was really, really good to see someone else come in and bowl some spin and be effective. Inoshi, again, has been on a real tear, bowling really, really well. And Kavisha kept up her stellar bowling. But how about that batting performance? Chamri, with her sort of characteristic power, just smashing through those first 12 overs, getting the bulk of the chase done, because 156 is a pretty big chase. But then Harsitha just kind of handling that end of the chase as wickets are falling around her, right? Kind of in clumps, just calmly, silently ticking off those final runs to get them over the line. And, this is their third big series win in the past year. They beat England, right? They beat New Zealand. This is phenomenal work. They've now beaten South Africa 3 out of the last four times that they've played them. And we're now 7th, I believe, in the T20 world rankings. And I think we were 10th or 11th at the beginning of last year. So we are just shooting up those charts. Again, another thing that's really exciting to see is, yes, Chamri is one of the best players in the world, but everyone else is contributing. Vishmi came in last innings and played a brilliant knock. Harsitha played a great one today. Kavisha played a blinder last match and then bowled really well. So everyone's chipping in. It's great to see it. It seems like their confidence is growing and they're ready and excited to take on the big moments. And it makes me super excited for the Women's World Cup coming up in Bangladesh.
Yeah, I think the great thing of what we've seen in this series, Nick, is that as Dom said, it's not just reliant on performances from one player, because I think too much on the narrative around the women's team was that it was built around one superstar. It was kind of like reading a Greek or Roman epic where it was like built around this hero. It was like, right, if Achilles doesn't come on and perform, or Charmery doesn't score the runs, then everyone else is gonna run for cover. When actually what we're seeing is that the Charmery effect is kind of washing down the team, and actually some of the other players who we've known have had promise and we know we've had talent are starting to really realise that, and that's particularly when it comes to the batting is what's getting us this series win in particular, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think you have to look at that second T20 and, Chomari gets out for 6 and they're chasing 130 odd and you're thinking like, wow, that looks like quite a mountain to climb. And I said last time that I thought maybe Vishmi had been promoted to the senior side too early. I'm so happy to be proven totally wrong because, I mean, she struck the ball beautifully, as did Kavisha Dilhari. I'm really high on Kavisha. I mean, she looks a great player. The way that she hits those lofted straight shots, but also her bowling, how tough she is to get away. I think that this side just seems to be growing and growing. And I think it's really worth mentioning, the sort of the fortitude and the mental strength it takes to go 1-0 down in a series away from home and then come back and win it 2-1, which they've done now in their last 2 away series, right, against teams who are ranked higher than them. So, I think there's a lot to be excited about. One thing that I just noticed, which is interesting or struck me, was the six that Vishmi hit in the second T20I was her first in international cricket. Kavisha Dilhari has, I think, two in something like 60 international appearances. So if those two in particular could work a little bit on their range hitting and start to hit sixes, then, I mean, with Chamari and Harshita in the top order, it's looking really exciting and dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's, Vishmi's a player that I kind of feel I've championed for quite a while, right? Since I saw her perform in the under-19s, 2 or 3 years ago, and she was a young player in the under-19s, gets into the senior squad, arguably a bit a bit earlier than it should have happened, but because of the nature of women's cricket in Sri Lanka, that's what happens, is that you've got to come in and you kind of learn on the job. And unlike the men's team, if you are given chances and they do stick with you, I think the big thing is for all these girls is exposure, right? If you kind of rewind back to about a year ago or just over a year ago when the last World Cup was happening in South Africa, was that a year ago? I think so. So let's say 18 months ago, whatever it was, just as that World Cup began, and I think Sri Lanka played in the opening game against South Africa, and that's where they beat them the first time, right? The SLC announced, I think, that day that they were increasing the match fees for the players, and that was almost like the moment where kind of has lit the litmus paper, as it were, for all these results. But I think the key thing is actually exposure to playing at higher levels and playing against these players on a regular basis. If you look at, Charmry's our best player, and that's unlocked being able to go around and play franchise cricket, work with different coaches, and you've got to look at the other girls and go, is that going to happen to them? At which point will the Big Bash start looking at other players and going, actually, there's really great value and really great skill in this Sri Lanka side, and it's not just Charmry. There's other players around it as well who deserve a shot at it, and that's what's going to build someone like Vishmi's career, because she's got so much experience already, and I don't think she's even 19 yet. Though the problem is when you look at the stats for all these players, you look at Rishma, I think her average is like 12.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really reflect her skill or ability as a player. And I imagine for the girls it's frustrating. I imagine for the coaches it's frustrating, because it's frustrating for us, the fans. So what I'm basically saying is, come on, Big Bash, come on, 100, come on, WPL. You've got Charmry in. Now open the gates to the other players.
It's interesting that you bring this up, Mark, because I was thinking, comparing the men and the women, right? The women have played South Africa, England, Australia, and New Zealand, right? Recently. The men don't get games like that. That sort of centrifugal force of the big three that's there in men's cricket, right, is not there for women's cricket. Teams play each other. There's this sense of equality. So it's like, if we are playing international cricket, we are not going to just be playing three teams that we always face, but we'll play everybody. Australia is playing Bangladesh right now, right? And I think that kind of is really important to notice that in women's cricket, yes, the leagues can be helpful, but women's international cricket is a little bit more equitable than men's cricket in terms of dispersing opponents. And I think that plays a massive, massive role. Second thing I want to point out is, are we seeing shades of 96? We've got a tournament in the subcontinent. We've got a fearless leader. I'm just imagining Chamri holding up that trophy like Arjuna did now 28 years ago. But I'm wondering if we're seeing the birth of a side that has this character, that wins when they're not expected to, that has these unheard of players that no one really is expecting much from. But maybe they're going to turn up big in a few months.
I'm reluctant to say anything. I'm just going to leave this for Nick to.
I can see the parallels, and I mean, it's a really quite unique bowling attack, isn't it? That's quite different to sort of what else is going around international women's cricket and could kind of upset some people on slow, low pitches. I think if we're going to see a 96, got to get Alex Contouris in, got to get them, working on the fitness and catching balls because I missed the game today, but through the first two T20s, it looked like they couldn't catch a cold. So that's one area that I think this side needs to improve in. But apart from that, I mean, it's been a pretty unqualified success this series, hasn't it? And shout out to the under-19s who are getting a great opportunity to play a triangular against England and Australia and have taken games off both of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're second place right now. They're 2-2. England, I think, is topping the charts at 3-1, and Australia is 1-3. So they've taken, 2 games off big sides, and that's without Vishmi playing, who is eligible for under-19 cricket, right? So their best batter is not in the side, and they're doing that. So shout out to them. And again, we've given SLC a lot of crap for the way they've treated women's cricket, but organizing this tournament is such a huge step forward for the women's side, right? Getting exposure, like you were talking about, Mark, at the highest level is going to serve those girls so well.
I think SLC need to kind of seize the moment here. We've seen a what was it called, the Super 50 or whatever, that a girls' domestic tournament very recently concluded. We've got this under-19s tournament, and the Sri Lankan girls are as good as the Aussies and the English skill wise. And now the women's team are having a lot. The senior women's side are having a lot of success last year. I think it's time now for women's LPL. Try and get that in, build that. I think Sri Lanka can attract the best women's players from around the world to come in and play for it, and give our best girls, our best domestic girls cricketers, exposure to some of the best players around the world. Everyone enjoys a couple of weeks in Sri Lanka. It's a great place to go on holiday. It's a great place to go play cricket, and I'm sure SLC can build a business case to have a women's LPL tournament. I'm sure the owners of the current LPL teams would be more than grateful for the amount of games they played every year to effectively be doubled, and them to be able to have double revenue, double bubble, as it were, for a whole calendar year. So I think we talk about Charmery and other players getting into franchises, but maybe actually the solution is do it ourselves. The Thanos solution, in all of it, because I think that's the only way that we're going to consistently compete, right? Because I think the under-19s tournament's fascinating to me, right? Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't think our girls would compete with the Aussies and the English girls, and I've been proved thankfully grateful for this. I've been proved wrong, and that we're up there with the best of them. And I think we need to try and raise the profile of women's sport in the island and women's cricket in the island, and prove out to young girls and parents of young girls that you can, if you are good enough, you can have a career as a cricketer, regardless of your gender in Sri Lanka, right? Yeah. So that's my plea to SLC on a way in which I think they could grow the game and the island, and get more kids into cricket in the long run, because I spent a lot of time last week watching Sri Lanka's FIFA matches, and FIFA have really set their eyes upon our island, for better or for worse. So I think there is some element of competing for kids' hearts and minds, and SLC got to be at the forefront of it, I think. Shall we talk about the test series against Bangladesh? Because I found that a highly satisfying win. Nick, what is your read on the series in overall after our sparkling 2-0 win?
I mean, it is a sparkling 2-0 win, isn't it? And I don't think it should be forgotten that New Zealand went to Bangladesh not that long ago and split a series. And I think that this Bangladesh side is actually better than quite a lot of previous iterations have been. And so this was a huge performance because I thought Sri Lanka outbatted, outbowled, and outfielded them. And the graphic popped up on my screen yesterday, I think it was, that they hadn't reached 200 in any of their first 3 innings, Bangladesh. The first time they got there was in the second innings of the second test. So, yeah, I mean, it was a really, really impressive performance. I thought it was great in the first innings of the second test to see 6 of the top 7 getting 50s. Really good test for Nishan Madushka, who'd been under a bit of pressure. Really good test for Kusal Mendis. Kamindu's been an unqualified success. And then just, what an outing it has been for the seam attack. They look really dangerous bowling in tandem, and I've just been so impressed with Lahiru Kumara. Another, wicket for his highlight reel yesterday, and if he can keep banging away that hard length on 4th, 5th stump line, getting a little bit of nibble off the seam, he's going to be a handful for batters around the world.
So, Dom, last week we talked about whether or not we need to look at Kusal at the number 3 position. I don't know if you listen to this podcast or not, but he answered all the questions that we set out for him. Is this Test batting lineup solidified for the series against England now? Is this what it's going to be, where it should be at, barring, of course, any injuries?
Yeah, I think it's pretty solidified. I think the only thing that we would be doing to change things up, we mentioned last week bringing someone like Potham in, right? But I don't know how much red ball cricket Potham has been playing recently. I don't think very much. They've told him to focus on white ball cricket. And we have a little bit of time between, the World Cup and the test in England for the test team to prepare. They're clicking well. They scored 531 runs without anyone scoring 100, which is both good and bad. We like to see people go out and get those big daddy hundreds, but to see everyone pitch in and look like they could handle Bangladesh's bowling attack, which is which is a strong bowling attack. They have both pace and spin, high quality, right? As Nick said, they beat Bangladesh at home, or they beat, New Zealand at home in one of the test matches, and then lost to them by 4 wickets in the other one. But I think this is the batting lineup that should go through. I think it's going to be an important series for a lot of these guys. This is going to be could be a career-defining series for a number of them. I know Demuth, right? He's slowly climbing up the all-time run-leading list. He's got 1600s. He doesn't have 100 in England. He's going to want to get his name on that Lord's Honours Board, right? Angie has played well, and Chandimal has played well in England, so they have experience. I think the first real sight we had of Kusal Mendis came in the 2016 Test Series against England, where when they looked hopeless against Jimmy Anderson, he was the only one to provide some sort of resistance. And I think DDS will see this as a big mark on his kind of captaincy here to shepherd them. So I think this is a batting lineup that will go to England with 1, a lot of experience, 2, a lot to prove, and 3, the skill to do it. I think hugely in their favor will be the time of the year that they're going over there. Usually, we get put in late May, early June when it's still kind of cold and the ball is seaming around a lot. So I'm hoping, and there's no tests at Edgbaston or something like that, or Trent Bridge. I think that we will see a very good batting performance. I think they will be all determined to score big runs and to prove some of their doubters wrong. Now they've also given themselves additional motivation. Now they're, I think, 4th in the World Test Championship. So now each game is going to matter more. So I'm excited to see how they play, to see how they do. And the addition of Kamindu at 7, and we can talk a little bit about whether we see him as a bowling all-rounder. Interestingly, he's bowling off spin now all the time. He's not switching arms, but he was effective. He was giving the ball a rip. Maybe in the late English summer, he'll get a little bit of spin from those decks. We might want to talk about what that bowling lineup is going to look at. I know Nick talked about how impressive the seamers are, whether we even want to carry Prabhat or go with 4 seamers. Mark is looking at me like, how dare you take Prabhat out of the lineup? But I think that batting lineup is looking good, and I think they have the ability to score big runs in England, especially because I'm imagining the pitches are probably going to be pretty flat.
Yeah. So, obviously this in theory should be mine and Nick's kind of sweet spot, right? Because we spend all our summers watching the English cricket team. I actually think at this stage, and 3 months is a long time for Sri Lankan cricket and English cricket. I think at this stage, Sri Lanka actually looked the more kind of settled team going into this series. We don't, we play our own unique brand of cricket, but Chris Silverwood has resisted any labeling it or nicknames for it. Maybe that's because there isn't as much of a kind of media fanfare around the Sri Lanka Test team as there is the England side. I think every player who's there seems to be kind of have their own missions and is there in merit and is in some way kind of in some sort of form. And it's a settled side where with England, I think there's question marks all over that team. I saw some quotes from Ollie Robinson, who I'm not even sure will end up playing against England. It will end up playing against Sri Lanka, about how they lost the India series by fine margins. That's not the series that I watched, but admittedly I was on the pitch, so maybe the squad feel quite differently about it.
Neither was he, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true, but he was in a pavilion, right? So I kind of feel, and on top of all that, I think the good thing about when Sri Lanka come to England is there's absolutely just no pressure on them. There was no pressure in kind of 2014 when that was probably our best ever Test side. Still, no one expected us to win it. There was no pressure in 1998 when we really spun England off the park at the Oval. And I just feel, I think after Angelo got timed out and we got suspended by the ICC, and we had that horrific World Cup, it just felt like a really low point again for Sri Lanka cricket. But suddenly, 6 months later, actually, I'm full of optimism. I'm full of hope. Shades of '96 were mentioned earlier. I think they're coming to the sunlit uplands off England later this summer, and maybe something special could happen. How do you feel about it all, Nick?
Yeah, I think you're right to tout on England being a bit unsettled, Marky. There's been a lot of talk about who's going to keep wicket, and I think the seam attack has, a lot of questions to be answered, right? Jimmy seems to be entering the very final throes of his career. Ollie Robinson is clearly a very talented bowler, but there are questions around his fitness and his application. I don't think he's kicked on in the way that England would have hoped that he would. Chris Woakes, who was fantastic in the Ashes, hasn't been seen a huge amount since. Mark Wood doesn't look like he can play back-to-back tests. So really, Jack Leach has been injured a lot. He's spent more time injured than he has done playing. So, who's going to carry the real burden? Who's going to be the workhorse of that bowling attack? I don't think is particularly clear at the moment. And I totally agree with you guys about late summer playing massively into Sri Lanka's hands. I've just got a feeling it's going to be a hot summer in England, maybe more out of optimism than anything else. But, and I think that this England side would rather play on flat pitches than on green seamers. So I think we're going to get batting friendly wickets that might have a bit in it for spin bowling, actually, and that this could be a good tour for Prabhat. I think DDS and Kamindu is a really exciting lower order pairing, particularly in this series. I don't know. I always feel like teams who've played against this Bazball England find a bit of that spirit of carefreeness entering their own cricket. I'm starting to sound like Ben Duckett now, but I do think it has an effect, and I think that for players like Kusal Mendes and Dhananjaya De Silva and Kamindu Mendes, that might be a positive thing. I'm really excited to see Bazball versus Spoonball, and I think it's going to be a closer series than people in England expect.
Yeah, I'll just say buzzing. I'll just say buzzing for the boys because I think in a way, it's like Angelo and Dimmoth kind of at the peak of their batting powers and their as test batters at least. I think DDS and Kamindu is like I know it's only been 2 test matches, but I mean the fact that both of them bowl as well, and it's kind of like in red ball cricket, both quite handy. I think is unbelievable because it just opens up to the possibility of playing that extra seamer, right? And it means that we're with the girls, they found the way to beat South Africa. When Sri Lanka's had their really great moments in cricket, it's because of great moments of innovation. And I think finding 2 middle order batters who can really hold up an end, if need be, I think is totally inspired. And I'm sure there's many more moments of it, and it's kind of a happy accident. I don't think anyone can really say it was some sort of innovation to groom Kamindu Mendes to play this particular role, right? But the fact it's all happened, I think, could be a real blessing for this team in England and potentially beyond, right? I do wonder if some players are planning to retire after this series.
Going to say it does feel a bit like it could be a swan song for Ange and Chandy and Dimmoth, no?
Well, Ange's become like a multi-format player, right? So
yeah, I guess. But these guys are getting on, right?
Yeah. Well, DDS was said today. He said he hopes that Angie and Dimmoth and Chandy can play for another 3 to 4 years. That's what he said. I think of those 3, I think the most likely is Dimmoth because I think he's got a tick list where he wants to score 10,000 runs, he wants to hit 25 centuries, he wants to have his average go to 45. So I think he's most likely to stick on, and I think as opening batter age doesn't really matter too much, right? He's like, I've figured out how to play and I'm just going to milk that as long as I can, and he seems to be stuck in. So I don't know if it'll be a swan song. I think they plan on sticking it out a little bit more, maybe till the end of this WTC cycle, right, which is 2025. I would imagine that they probably want to stick that out.
So I think that's the key thing, right? So I reckon if they come over here and they lose 3-0, I think maybe Chandy and Ange call it a day for Test cricket, right? If they come here and they win 3-0, they're in a really good position to get to that final at that point, right? So I think they kind of stick with it. I agree. I don't think Dimmoth's going anywhere else. I wonder if that Old Trafford test, which I think is the first test, could be Jimmy's last test. I mean, I assume he'll want to finish at Old Trafford. And I assume he's probably thinking it's easy wickets to be picked against Sri Lanka, and also I don't think that he'll play back-to-back tests, but who knows? Because he's kind of bionic, right? So I wonder if that might be Jimmy's swan song, and that might trigger a few others in the England side, depending off how it goes with the T20 and how it goes against the West Indies. Because the one thing I can absolutely guarantee is that England will underestimate the West Indies, and then they'll underestimate Sri Lanka as well. And if like in a way we kind of want, because the West Indies are coming earlier in the summer. If you don't know, coming to England earlier in the summer. If the West Indies kind of soften up England, then I think they'll be absolutely ripe for picking. I haven't looked into results in terms of how England generally go in summers when they have kind of two quote unquote smaller test teams they have to play against. But I imagine if the West Indies open them up, then Sri Lanka can do an absolute job on them.
I think
I'll go on.
No, I was going to say, I think the other thing to remember too is it opens a long period of Test cricket for Sri Lanka too, because they have, I think, New Zealand at home and then in South Africa. So those are going to be challenging. Tough to beat those teams. But I think they'll actually, for the first time, kind of have a 4-month period where they're playing 7 or 8 test matches, right? As opposed to one where, okay, they play a couple, then it's 3 or 4 months and they play another couple, and where they play a one-off. So I'm excited to see them get to build and have those players. I think that Angie and Demuth and Chundi are going to want to see this year out for sure, and kind of hang on. And I think you're right about the England team being in turmoil. Stokes pulled out of the T20 World Cup, right? So I'm assuming that means he's going to play more Test cricket in the future. But people like Bairstow and Anderson, we don't know how many years they have left or what they plan to do. So it'll be very interesting. And I think teams on different sort of trajectories as well.
Go on, Nick.
Oh no, I thought you were about to jump in, Marky.
No, you go.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. Shamar Joseph and Al-Jazari Joseph could, two guys who can clock 150 could rough them up a little bit. And it's a really exciting summer for me. I mean, as you guys well know, I've got a foot in every camp here, in the England camp, the Windies camp, and the Sri Lanka camp. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Should be an exciting summer. Really buzzing for it. I think before we go, the only thing we should check in on is how's that pitch looking? How's the stadium build coming in New York for Sri Lanka's first game in the T20?
I think there's a lot of excitement going on. I was actually on Long Island this weekend, and they just ran a full. They ran a newspaper spread about cricket, how the stadium's coming along. The stands are up, so that's a good sign. They plan on leaving the pitch in there for the future, so that cricket can be played on Long Island, which I think is a really exciting thing. I have to admit, even though the pitch seems to be starting to come in, I'm a little worried about how this drop-in pitch will work, since it doesn't seem like any sod has been laid or any turf has been put down. And I know I'm no groundskeeper, but I know that's an involved process. So here's to hoping that they do a good job and that they're able to have this all set in stone by June 3rd. I'm curious whether they'll do any practice matches before then, like if there'll be any warm-up matches in New York so that teams can get used to the size. The curators can see how things are shaping up, because I'd imagine Sri Lanka would play a match in New York prior, just to get a feel for things, but we shall see.
There's two things that I need to mention. The first thing is that you need to sign up for the newsletter if you haven't done so already. The link's in the description. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the show and I forgot, because I'm an idiot. And also, I should mention that we are considering doing some kind of meetups definitely before the test matches and potentially before the Sri Lanka's game in New York, which I think is the 2nd of June. Is it the 2nd of June, Dom?
3rd of June. 3rd of June.
3rd of June. So potentially a meetup either in the 2nd of June evening or maybe the 3rd of June evening. But I imagine hopefully we will be celebrating on the 3rd of June. So it'll be in a kind of could be an impromptu thing. If you wanna potentially be involved in it, if you're coming down to any of those fixtures, any of those games, then let us know. And just drop me a message on Twitter or tweet MarulliPod, or we're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We're not on Reddit. I suppose we could be on Reddit in some way. You could find us very easily. All three of us and Estelle all have like quite public profiles all over the place. So do get in touch. I think, lads, that's probably everything we've got to discuss. It's been quite an exciting week. Oh, go on, Nick. What have I missed?
Before we clock off, can we have a word about Matisha Patirana?
Yes, I was going to say the same thing.
I feel like the fact that this dude called Mayank Yadav has literally just like pulled on a pair of spikes and is suddenly bowling faster than anyone's ever bowled means that Patirana's really like flying under the radar in this IPL. But I mean, he's no joke, right? The fact that he's consistently touching 150, that he took like that amazing catch and then, I mean, bowled 2 searing Yorkers in an over. I mean, he's really doing bits, right? And I mean, I thought he bowled really well against the Gujarat Titans, but that performance against Delhi was like something. And I thought Prithvi Shaw was looking really dominant. And then as soon as he came on, Shaw just looked like notably a bit shook up. And yeah, I'm just super like excited to see those dipping Yorkers, to see his growth. And even after Pant got after him a bit in his 4th over, he came back and got his wicket, and like it just seems like sky's the limit for this guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think we've got to say, as Sri Lanka fans, we're so grateful for the work CSK have put into him, right? Because obviously he went to school in Sri Lanka, but he played for the under-19s. But he's gone there quite a young age. They had him as a net bowler. Brought him in. Was it last season or the season before? I can't remember. Is this the second or third season?
Yeah, I think this is his 3rd season now, right?
This is his 3rd season, and he's just going from strength to strength to strength, and that is testament to picking a player, sticking with him, investing in him, backing him, and it's incredible. And actually, I think it's if we're going to talk about him, let's talk about the Mumbai Indians, which has 2 Sri Lankans in key decision-making positions, the backroom staff. And, Nuran Tushra hasn't played for them yet. But if you look at the kind of Mumbai Indians at the moment, they just look so lost at sea, where you compare what CSK have done, and they've got a bunch of players there who they've brought in young and nurtured, and they're reaping rewards for it. And hopefully us Sri Lanka fans will see Patirana pick up bags and bags and bags of wickets in a Sri Lanka shirt. But it's unbelievable to me. It's great to me actually that you see what he's been doing, and he's been setting the world alight on the biggest stage of them all. And we're debating whether or not he should even start for us, which is testament to how the strength and depth of Sri Lanka's bowling at the moment, right, Dom?
But let's be clear here, though. I have no doubts that he should be a starter in that squad. He absolutely needs to start. I mean, come on. You saw those balls to Stubbs and Marsh. Those are top quality international batsmen. And to deliver, a 150K Yorker. I mean, and there he is. And I'm going to say it. I think he's the 2nd best death bowler in the world after Jasprit Bumrah. And if you have that talent in your team, you cannot afford to not play him. And you see his economy rate for the overs he's bowling. It's just unbelievable. He's a wicket taker. He's a smart bowler. And in T20 cricket, you can survive a few wides. That's fine. That's fine. Absolutely must play.
Nick, can Patirana do it on a hot day in early June in New York?
I reckon he can do it on a hot day in New Jersey. I agree with Dom. Like etch his name into the stone tablet that is the team sheet For me, he's got to play. And I think actually the timing of the World Cup coming off the back of an IPL season is probably really good for him, because he's playing games every 3 days consistently. And like we saw it with Malinga early in his career, that the more he bowled, the less wides he bowled, right? The more muscle he put on, the less wides he bowled. I'd be fascinated to know, because Paterona is like whip it thin, right? I would be really interested to know what kind of strength and conditioning program he's got going in the background. I'm sure he must be doing work. And I wonder if we're going to start to slowly see him get a little bit bulkier, and because that muscle will help with the radar. But I think, yeah, he's got to be part of that team on June the 3rd. Almost for me, kind of like he's approaching first name on the team sheet territory. Yeah, well, actually, obviously, there's a few who will also certainly be there. But yeah, it's just really exciting to see what he can do, the way he can crack games open on flat wickets, the way he's got, you know, batters like David Miller and Mitchell Marsh clearly worried about his pace and his unorthodoxy. And those two, the Marsh and Stubbs wicket, they both got serious dip, right? It's like, yeah, I think it's just that game on Sunday or whenever it was, it took me back to those years where Malinga would come on and bowl the 19th over in the IPL, and sides would be like chasing, I don't know, 20 off 2, and then he'd bowl an over where he conceded 4, and the game had just completely changed. And obviously Paterona's not quite there yet, but I think that we can all start to imagine it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what's really surprising to me, right? Because I remember when Malinga first arrived, people were like, well, eventually batters will learn how to pick him, and he won't be as effective. And that kind of never happened. And he was smart enough to kind of evolve his game along with it, and was effective all the way to the end of his career. And now we've seen, like, basically there's kind of multiple kind of slingers, right? Or at least bowlers releasing from different points. Because you can put Boomer in that as well. And so now we're like in the next process of it, and it still seems to be as effective as it was when Malinga first kind of burst onto the scene. And also the other thing that I find quite interesting about Paterona's trajectory is that we've seen him come in, or we still see him come in like ODI cricket and just not be as effective, and yet be able to step into the IPL. The minute he puts on a CSK shirt, it's like the fire is lit, or the lightning is summoned, and he absolutely lays down some absolute belters down that track, doesn't he? And but yeah, you can still see he's still got so much to go, and he's going to become more effective. And also, us lot who've watched him for a while can see where it's come from, and it's really satisfying to see him develop into that kind of player, right? It just shows, go back to my original point I made about the girls, it's about exposure, isn't it? And working with the best people. That's what's going to take you to that next level. And that's what's happened over there.
And like with Malinga, right, there was no blueprint for his career because he was the first. No one understood what a slinger was. Whereas like Paterona's got this guy who can act as a mentor and who's been through everything. I mean, he just needs to look at the way Malinga matured as a T20 bowler, and I mean that's a great blueprint for him. I'm sure that he's going to get better with his variations, that his Yorker's going to get more consistent, that the wides are going to come down, and so it's hugely exciting, right?
Massively so. Guys, should we leave it there? Oh, actually, no. Before I go, I do think as we've gotten onto this topic, we should probably kind of, I don't know, mourn the fact that we haven't seen any other striking players in the IPL.
We got Deekshana for one game, I think. That's been it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a shame because I was thinking like Mumbai are clearly intent on playing a left armour, right? So Madhushankar would have got games, and Sunrisers kind of look like they're really crying out for what Hasaranga could have offered. I noticed the other day when they were playing Gujarat, and they like after, I think, who is it who bats below Klaasen? Abdul Samad. But I mean, once you get past the top six, they're batting like you notice the real drop off.
Yeah.
And Markram hasn't really done it. And Hasaranga obviously would have been a huge upgrade on Markande from a bowling perspective. So I mean, yeah, he would have brought a lot to that side, as I think Madhushankar would have done to Mumbai. So it's a real shame to see those guys missing out.
And I'm hoping we see Chimera at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and actually, I think, to be fair, Mumbai maybe would have played Tushara as an impact sub the other day if they hadn't batted so badly and had to bring in Brevis. So I think it might not be that long before we see him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll go.
Mahela is stockpiling him and keeping him under wraps for the T20 World Cup. That's the other theory I have.
2 slingers. We played 2 slingers now.
There you go. That's the mystery.
I it's not for today because we need to see how this pans out, but we need to talk about Deekshner and what's quite happened with him, because if he's totally out of form, then that's could be potentially quite a big issue for Sri Lanka. Maybe that's how you play 2 slingers. I don't know. Guys, we'll leave it there. If you've got this far and you haven't signed up to the newsletter, it's probably my fault because I forgot to mention it at the top. But sign up for the newsletter, links to the description. Hit the subscribe, hit the follow. Let us know if you're planning to go to any Sri Lanka games in the near future. And we'll be back next week. See you all later. Bye.